Bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein for more on this. So, Rick, let's begin with Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House of Representatives. He says the commission would be duplicative of other investigations that are going on, counterproductive, maybe interfering with law enforcement. Does he have a point there, do you think? How would this commission work?
There's no question that it would cover ground that others have looked at and are looking at, whether that's criminal proceedings or the impeachment proceedings or various congressional committees that are already charged with looking at the events around January 6th. But there's 2 points I'd make. One is Kevin McCarthy was involved through staffers and through one of his close allies, the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee, who actually supports this bill, about the evolution of this commission. There were some key points in terms of the makeup of the commission that Republicans very much wanted to be a part of, and the commission would have a broader purview than any of the existing investigations. You heard Nancy Pelosi right there talk about the importance of this in the context of what we saw with the 9/11 Commission. Yes, there were other prosecutions, there were other investigations, but only the 9/11 Commission was able to connect all the dots, bring everything together in a holistic way that then made formal recommendations to Congress. That's what the goal was of this commission from the start, and Kevin McCarthy knew that, and it wasn't until yesterday that he came out and started to voice some additional concerns. It'll be an interesting vote this afternoon, Terry, because Republicans had basically resigned themselves to this happening. If these different concessions happened, they recognized that this was moving, and many of them are uncomfortable with the idea of opposing it, even though we now know that McCarthy, McConnell, and President Trump himself all think this is a bad idea.
And you're right, the country turns to these national commissions after great events in order to get a comprehensive understanding beyond law enforcement, things that aren't crimes that are important in order to try to solve problems going forward. Let me bring in congressional correspondent Rachel Scott on this as well. Rachel, you're on the ground there. What kind of battle over this should we expect in the Senate now that Mitch McConnell has voiced his opposition to it?
Well, Terry, if you're wondering why I'm in some random hallway on Capitol Hill, it's because we're posing that question today to especially the moderate senators, or moderate Republican senators, to see what they think about this commission. And our eyes are on those Republicans who voted to convict former President Donald Trump in the second impeachment trial to get a gauge about how they are feeling about this. And so far, most of them are on the fence about this commission. Some say they want to see maybe certain things change, and if those things do get changed, then maybe they could come out and support it. Overall, though, this is about getting to the bottom of this. And overall, Democrats, while they strongly support this, it does face an uphill battle there in the Senate. This is something that you're going to need at least 10 Republican senators on board with. And so you may have several who voted to impeach former President Donald Trump that may come around, but that's not enough. And now with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell speaking out against this, saying that he opposes it, it's really unclear if this really stands a chance with getting through the Senate.
Now, Rick, this vote didn't seem controversial just a few months ago. One of McCarthy's own deputies even helped negotiate the proposal. So what changed?
Well, a couple of things changed. One is the Democrats actually gave in to some demands that Republicans thought would never happen. They agreed to have a 50-50 split between Democratic and Republican appointed members. They agreed that that any kind of subpoena issued would have to have bipartisan support. They agreed to wrap up all of the work under the statute by December 31st of this year. Republicans are worried about it bleeding into next year. Frankly, many Republicans never thought the Democrats would give on all those points. So that's one thing. The other thing that happened, I think, is Liz Cheney last week, a tangible example of President Trump's influence over the House Republican conference. It's important to note here that this commission almost certainly would want to talk to President Trump, and it would want to talk to Kevin McCarthy. There was contradictory, conflicting information out there about the conversations that McCarthy had with President Trump on January 6th itself. One of McCarthy's colleagues said that, in essence, President Trump told McCarthy about the rioters that it was Antifa, and that maybe there's just some people that are more upset about the election than you are, Kevin. He's never confirmed or denied directly that account. People are going to want to hear from it, including Liz Cheney, who thinks he should be subpoenaed. So we've only seen President Trump's influence grow in the Republican conference. So that, I think, is the biggest factor that's driven McCarthy and now McConnell as well against this commission, even though in the case of McCarthy, he was involved in its inception.
And Rachel, there are some conflicting accounts now of what actually happened on the 6th itself. You were there covering the attack on the Capitol. I know you've spoken with members of Congress about their experiences. Congressman Andrew Clyde of Georgia, who was helping to barricade the door to the Senate chamber at one point, he recently downplayed the assault as a, quote, normal tourist visit. So what are you hearing from members of Congress about January 6th now versus what they said during and right after the attack that day?
Yeah, it has been really interesting, Diane, to see sort of the narrative change about what happened here on January 6th. Look, after the insurrection, after we saw violent mobs storm the United States Capitol, some of them chanting to hang Mike Pence, going after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, leaving notes on her desk. Some had their feet up on her desk as well. A woman was shot and killed right there in the Speaker's lobby. We have now seen some Republicans compare it to a tourist walk. We have even seen the change in tone from Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who right after the insurrection, he came out and he said that Trump bears some of the responsibility for what happened on January 6th. And then he just a few days later changed his tone and he said, well, he didn't know whether or not, he didn't believe Trump provoked any of the mobs that stormed the United States Capitol. And even those who have spoken out, you remember Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, he gave a very fierce and fiery speech after he voted to acquit the former president, condemning him for his actions that he believed led to the January 6th insurrection. It's been silence lately. And so there has been this stark division in the Republican Party. Many of them are focused on putting this behind them. Kevin McCarthy said he doesn't want to relitigate the past here when he talked about Congresswoman Liz Cheney and her remarks against the former president. But Democrats say at the end of the day, you have to get to the bottom of what happened here to prevent it from happening again. And that is a legitimate fear. I can also tell you just from talking to sources here, there is this sense of not really having any friends across the aisle anymore. You have some here in Congress who had been hesitant about co-sponsoring bills with Republicans who voted to overturn the election. So this is something that is now deepening relationships. It's now affecting relationships for lawmakers here in Congress, which affects how many of these bipartisan bills are going to get through the House and through the Senate.
You know, Rick, we really shouldn't be surprised, should we? I remember the night of the election. And the insurrection, I should say, the insurrection. I was in the studio on the air, and I said to our colleagues, you know, why are we talking about it like it's over? This is the beginning of something. I thought January 6th was the beginning of what would be years of a struggle over not just the Republican Party, but the nature of our democracy. And I wonder, what does it say that Republicans have rejected this very traditional method of trying to get to the bottom of a very important national event? What does it tell us about Republicans and about where we're heading?
Not a lot of good things, Terry. I mean, look, I also thought after January 6th that it was so clear what had happened that that the idea of a commission to get to the bottom of it was sort of a no-brainer, maybe even extraneous. But all you need to do is listen to some of the testimony that Rachel referenced and Diane referenced from last week, where you had members of Congress who were outright saying that this was like tourists, or maybe this was left-wing agitators, or do we really know they were Trump supporters? They witnessed this, and still they said this and they thought this. It says that President Trump's influence is as big as ever, and that's on a personality basis, now policy basis, and in terms of the way that he has manipulated and outright misled and lied about facts, about the election, about the events of January 6th. That is the identity now of the Republican Party, and the idea of bipartisanship seems like a distant thought right now. And I detected, Terry, a bit of a threat there from Nancy Pelosi, that is saying that we're going to get to the truth one way or the other. She did mention that she's got the power as Speaker of the House. Democrats could do a commission of sorts on their own, just a select committee like the Benghazi committee that the Republicans impaneled very famously during the Obama years, in part to tarnish Hillary Clinton, we were to learn. And she still has that in her back pocket. She's trying to play this out, knowing there will be some Republicans who defect from President Trump and Kevin McCarthy today. But the facts of the matter are that Republicans can block this almost certainly in the Senate. And that is not a good statement about the ability to come together just to answer questions, much less to address problems.
And Rick, you mentioned the fact that House Republicans just recently ousted Congresswoman Liz Cheney from party leadership over her criticism of former President Trump and his election claims. So is this vote a loyalty test of sorts for Republicans?
No question. And I actually think it may be a more pure loyalty test than the vote last week for Liz Cheney for a couple of reasons. One, that was behind closed doors. Two, it was no recorded vote. We don't even know what the numbers were. And three, there were a lot of reasons that a Republican might want to rid themselves of Liz Cheney. Maybe they didn't like the fact that she wasn't loyal to Trump. Maybe they just didn't like her. Maybe they didn't like the fact that she was saying what she was saying publicly. This is pretty direct. You've got, in this instance, an agreement that was negotiated with Republican input that's still supported by a Republican ranking member. The Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group of centrists, has come out in favor of this as well. Who's against it? Well, it's McCarthy, it's Trump, it's Steve Scalise, the Republican whip. It's House leadership that has aligned itself almost exactly with President Trump. And there are a lot of members of Congress, I think, who secretly would like to not have this as an issue, but now are conflicted because they see the policy choice ahead of them in terms of this commission and what its makeup would be. And they see the imperative, they view a political imperative with President Trump out there agitating on the outside. So I think this is actually a pretty important vote, in some ways a more consequential vote even than the one to oust Cheney last week.
You know, Rachel, as Rick just said, the Republicans didn't seem to want to take yes for an answer. They kept making demands, and the Democrats kept granting them, that it would be split evenly down the middle. No appointments by the Democratic president. Subpoena power would be shared, not controlled by the majority. So, but Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader, he says that this commission on the insurrection on January 6th should be a review of political violence in American cities last summer amid racial justice protests. So, you know, is that likely to go anywhere? What kind of scope do the Republicans want, or is this just really a poison pill to kill it?
Republicans are fearing that this is perhaps possibly going to interfere with the midterm elections, that this may be dragged out past the end of the year and may ultimately affect their chances of taking back the House or taking back the Senate. We know that from sources, but Leader Kevin McCarthy and other Republicans have also been clear that they really wanted to broaden the scope on this. They wanted to include an investigation into Black Lives Matter, into Antifa, and Democrats pushed back against that. They said this needs to be solely focused on getting to the bottom of what happened here on January 6th and the Capitol insurrection, that you can't cloud it with all of these other things instead of really focusing on the incident where many of them were running for their lives, as a matter of fact. And still to this day, there's still people out there, suspects that are out there that have not been arrested. The FBI just released video today. And so this is going to be a key concern as it moves over to the Senate, and whether or not these amendments are going to change, whether or not we could see things altered in the bill. My guess here is that Democrats are not going to budge on the scope of this. They want it to be directed solely at the January 6th commission, solely at the January 6th insurrection. And what is most notable about this, Terry, as you talk about Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, is that Republicans negotiated this package as well. Representative John Katko, who had McCarthy's blessing to go about these negotiations, to work out a bipartisan deal, he was in the room. And Democrats did give up a lot of legroom here on what they wanted and to compromise with Republicans. But at the end of the day, McCarthy came out along with Steve Scalise, along with Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and they're opposed to this.
All right, Rick Klein and Rachel Scott, thank you both.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.